In the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful, praise be upon the Almighty God, and also blessings to Prophet Muhammad. Felicitations on auspicious and great Eid al-Mabath of the Prophet of Islam. Congratulations to all members of Islamic community and the endeared and respected people of Iran. And also congratulate the whole freedom seekers of the world. Well, the day of Mabath, or the appointment of Muhammad to prophethood, there are days and nights that are the greatest gifts of the world of existence. In the special prayer, it's been mentioned as it's attributed to the Prophet of Islam. He's been regarded as the best creature of the Almighty God. That was a gift awarded to him, of course, by bestowed, or appointment of the Prophet of Islam. That's actually a gift to the entire humanity as well. If you consider the multitude of virtues and values, the whole range of Islamic values, if you just regard and bear in mind two virtues, that is the element of wisdom and also the element of nurturing of morals. These are the, there's a whole set of Islamic values and virtues, but these two are the outstanding and prominent virtues. If you just bear in mind these two elements and see what huge emphasis Islam has laid upon them, you will affirm that Islam considers the loftiest present to humanity, that's what is presented to human beings. So it's wisdom and prudence and the propagation of the same thing. This is what Islam is inviting to. That's an important thing. In the Holy Quran, we have tens of verses and tens of cases, maybe close to 100 cases. If you just count those cases, you would see there are different interpretations by saying tabanun or tadafakir, that means ponder upon or contemplate or words like that. The Almighty God is addressing his servants and massive people to ponder and sit down and think and contemplate. Now, as for moral concepts and nurturing of those concepts, it's just suffice to say that among the loftiest goals of the bestowed or appointment of Muhammad to prophethood, it's morals that stand on the very top. There's several verses in the Holy Quran. It said that we send Prophet Muhammad. First comes purity and piety. That's mentioned. It's purification. Also another verse is being cited in Arabic, that we descended upon them, verse of the Holy Quran, to purify their souls. There are some other places, some other verses in the Holy Quran, that the goal of the bestowed or prophethood is called, is actually the purification and purity of soul. These are the two lofty aspirations and virtues that are gifted to mankind. This is what Islam has done, and Islam is insisting on that. And it's also calling upon its believers and consequently the whole masses of people and humanity to turn to wisdom, prudence, and purifying their mind and soul. That's the biggest gift that Islam has bestowed upon humanity. There are a number of points I want to mention regarding the bestowed, or appointment of the Holy Muhammad to prophethood, and then a number of points regarding the developments. So one point regarding this occasion is when Muhammad was appointed to prophethood, it just helped materialize something that seemed to be impossible. And what was that? The fact that the people residing in the Arab island during the time, the era of ignorance, I will cite their characteristics. From among that people, a virtuous or community like the Islamic community came to be and was formed. So it seems that such a thing, when you through average eyes, that seems not to be possible. The people in Arabia before Muhammad was appointed to prophethood, they had certain characteristics mentioned in Nahj al-Balagha book and also in his Gone Down in History. They had gone awry. They were purposeless, and they had no goals in their lives, and they were highly ignorant, and they were beset with large seditions and division that were the result of great ignorance. And despite all these attributes and characteristics, lack of wisdom, knowledge, prudence, and they were devoid of any morsel of moral values, no goals in their lives, no aspirations. And so they were at the same time highly arrogant and ferociously violent. They wouldn't accept others' rights. These are what people were like in Arabia, in the city of Mecca and elsewhere, from top to bottom, everyone, rank and file, and also their elders. These were their characteristics and how they used to be. And so from the same people, the Prophet of Islam turned the same people into a nation during this little span of time that I'll mention. They proved to be a united people. When you look at the Muslims, the Prophet's era, those who were confined to the city of Medina, or when they spread out to Taif and Mecca and elsewhere, they stood united. They were virtuous. They were sacrificial, and they possessed the loftiest virtues, moral values. The very same people with those characteristics were intended to such human beings. So this didn't seem to be feasible. I mean, you could never come to a conclusion that in a short span of time, such people would turn into totally different people with these virtues. And then in less than 20 years' time, then their fame got spread out. I mean, the very same people with those characteristics, after they embraced Islam, it was less than 20 years, the word got around and it became famous, and the reputation got extended to different parts of the world. Their thoughts, their ideas, and their magnanimity were spoken about elsewhere in the world. As we put it these days, both in terms of software and hardware, they underwent huge development. This is what Islam did. And that's truly something that seemed to be impossible. Yet Islam made that happen. This is what the Mab'ath did, the appointment of Muhammad to prophethood. That was the result. So this is what happened in the course of history. Today, we can benefit from this. Well, this is good tidings. This is a promise for Muslims in the course of history. It's been there, to the effect that any time there is a will of the masses of people, if it's parallel with the divine will, and if it's a function of the divine will, then human beings would be able to do things that would seem to be impossible. They can attain goals and targets that, in the eyes of conventional, calculations, they are far-fetched. That's always been so. It's been so in the course of history. The very same prophetic experience could recur. If people stand on that line, they will be able to achieve lofty aspirations that, when you look, based on calculations by average man, seem to be impossible. Of course, there's some differences. The same thing with some differences happened to Iranian people. God was kind to the Iranian people and bestowed upon the Iranian people and allowed them to experience almost the same thing. And that was the eradication of we had this absolute monarchy in this country that was ousted. It was a despotic rule that relied on materialistic values and devoid of any kind of spirituality. And it had its roots in history. So this happened in this country, and what supported this monarchy in this country was the United States and the superpowers in the world. It was the U.S., the UK, and even recently we had the former Soviet Union that stood in support of the Pahlavi regime. But the Iranian people were able to uproot this monarchical system that seemed to be impossible. It really seemed impossible. So the people did manage to make this happen, and that led by the late Imam Khamenei, and also the resolution on the part of the Iranian people. That's what happened. Well, those days, we were there on the stage and on the forefront, and we're abreast of everything. And so when we were told that such a thing could happen, then we would take it with a pinch of salt, but it did happen. So this revolution took the people out of their passive mood. It just got them moving. It bestowed upon them some fervor and zeal. It was not only this revolution that portrayed its greatness to the world, it also brought greatness to the Iranian nation, and the Islamic Iran seemed to be great in the eyes of the world. So that's the first point. So in case we stand and we move on the path of the Prophet, then we'll be able to make possible the impossible, and will be able to achieve goals and aspirations that seem to be inaccessible and unachievable. Now, the next point regarding the appointment of Muhammad to prophethood, the Ayatollah Mabath, is that despite the way that some people differentiate between faith and policy. They say these should be segregated, that governance is different from, faith and religion. They got to stand separately. And there are different groups that are working on this, and they've been there since before. And at the back of the revolutionary move, their action was nullified. But still, you see that there are some individuals who are whispering the same thing. They're writing things, they're making speeches to that. And despite what they think, the apex of the prophetic uprising was the formation of a governance system. And the Prophet of Islam himself set the very preliminary stages for that to happen. So with the elderly and the heads of tribes of the city of Medina, they had heard about Islam, and they went there to see what's happening. The Prophet talked to them, negotiated with them, and he signed contracts with them. And agreements, they came to agreements. Of course, at that time, it was not called Medina, it used to be called Yathrib. So he paved the way for that. And then the Prophet of Islam started his migration, and then Muslims started their migration gradually. Migrants came in before the Hijrah or the migration. The Prophet sent an envoy to Yathrib, as his envoy. He was sent there to Yathrib, and he recited the verse of the Holy Quran for the people in that city. So he paved the way first, and then the Prophet himself immigrated into Yathrib, and he established and set the foundation of the Islamic governance system there. That was the apex of his prophethood. And he did not suffice to this only by just forming a government system to run the affairs of the people. He didn't stop here. He started to confront the enemies, because the enemies, did not leave the Muslims alone. Well, some armies were formed, military equipment were provided. They raided the enemy. At times they defended themselves. At times they attacked. Both ways, because sometimes some people say that some Prophet of Islam only took part in defensive wars. No, that was not the same thing. Sometimes it was an attack. So it was a counterattack. Then he conquered the base of polytheism. That was the city of Mecca. He conquered that place, and the house of God came to be in the possession of Muslims, and the Islamic governance was stabilized and established there. This is the most exciting and the apex of forming an Islamic governance. So how could these people, say that faith is separate and should be segregated from governance? Now, the other point about the Mabath is that one of the most important and major slogans and strategies of the Prophet of Islam was to confront and face ignorance. Well, in the Holy Quran, on multiple occasions, you hear that the ignorance. I'll explain to you what we mean by ignorance. Several times the Quran has mentioned it, and as it is mentioned in Arabic in Asa, for example, verse. Also we have in another chapter, and several other places in the Holy Book. There are three verses that I had in my mind, and I put it down on paper, and I just mentioned for it. So, so what is this ignorance that Islam is? It's not only a lack of knowledge. It's there. It's part of it, of course. But by ignorance, it's got a wider definition in Islam. It's also demeaning. And also mean morals and attributes. Actually, I mentioned some of them, and also some attitudes, some like thieving, like the aggression, like rape, like oppression, and these were all rampant in Arabia, the desert at that time. This is also part of ignorance, also sexual deviation, and and immorality, and so lack of respect among the people. And these were all parts of the notion of ignorance when we mentioned that. So, and this is what prophethood came to stand against. When the ignorance which is mentioned in Asa chapter attributing to prophets' wives, that's such a thing that I just mentioned. It's both lack of knowledge and information and illiteracy, and it's immoral values, discrimination, trampling upon other people's rights, moral decadence, and also sexual issues and deprivation. They are all parts of ignorance. So the Prophet stood against ignorance. And the main point here is the fact that many of those immoral attributes that were rampant in the city of Mecca and the island of Arabia at that time, and against which the Prophet stood, many of those attributes can be seen in today's so-called modern Western world, and they can be seen in a much more organized and much broader scale in today's world. Exactly the very same vicious attributes, and it's even stronger and fiercer. Well, today, living in Western civilization is on the basis of avarice, is on the basis of greed. The basis of life in the Western civilization is greed and avarice. So the very foundation of all the Western values is money. Money is the yardstick for everything. Morals, spirituality, everything is measured on the basis of money. So the rampant policy, strategies, the governance, they all serve discrimination. They all serve the fattening of corporations and cartels. That's how things are today. So knowledge and science at the service of slaughtering people. Technology and science is at the service of taking people's lives. Once you can use the science and technology, let's say, to make some vaccine or a certain medicine to save people's lives, but the same knowledge could be used to make weapons of mass destruction, make biological and chemical weapons, atomic bombs, that hundreds of times more people that are saved could be killed by these scientific achievement. That's what happened in the world, and it's still happening. So the looting and plundering of weaker countries, moral decadence, sexual deprivation, and homosexuality. You just feel ashamed of even mentioning them. This is the chaos and this what you see, and sexual issues that are rampant in the world today. The very same things that used to be in those times and time and age. It was a limited scale, and now you see them more organized and much more extensive. Many of these corrupt issues, behind them there's some artificial logic. I mean, they seem to have some ideological backing. There is some thought that's fabricated and that's offered to humanity. So ignorance is still there. So if you take a look at today's Western civilization, that's modern ignorance. If you just call this, as many people have called this, modern ignorance, and they are right. This is the very same concept and notion, but in a, let's say, in a renewed way, in a modernized way. It still exists, and you can see that in the world. So what should be done? There are lessons that we need to review from the ordainment of Muhammad to prophethood, what the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, did in the face of ignorance in his era. Now it's incumbent upon us to continue and stand against this ignorance. This is our duty. We're going to cement our firm belief and faith. That's what's important for us and all those who sympathize with human beings all over the world. We should enhance our faith-based and religious-based faith. And we should also develop true believers in the world, people who should have some religious incentive, people who are for resilience and for work. They need to be boosted. We should also try to cement the foundations of the Islamic establishment. There isn't a governance system that it's bearing the flag of Islam, the banner of Islam. That's what you see with the blessing of God happened in Iran. We need to cement that, and we need to boost it to the best of our ability, and then accomplishment achievements hopefully could be further. And then we should have this wise planning in place. This is not one of those fields where you can simply close your eyes and attack. You need to study. You need to work. You need to have a wise plan. It should be based on wisdom. So this plan also needs to rely upon the identification and recognition of the attributes of ignorance. If you do not know about this ignorance and what it's all about, you cannot confront it. You cannot fight it. Of course, we cannot claim that in doing such great things, we've achieved our goals and objectives. No, we have taken steps and strides, but we're halfway through. Of course, we have done work, we have made headway, but still we're just halfway through, and we're still distant from our goals. But despite this, despite the fact that we're still halfway through, and we still are distant from our goals, still the pattern of the Islamic revolution for the world people, we are setting an example for world Muslims. It's an attractive example and pattern. Well, you can see just several thousand kilometers from Tehran, elsewhere in another country, there is an insult against our dear martyr Soleimani, and then people show such reaction that police that insulted the picture, the police went there and apologized. And again, they had the photo of General Soleimani on the walls of the city. Again, this is such an attractive pattern. So you see, even we are halfway through, it's still attractive enough. This is attractive enough pattern for Muslims. If we could tread on this path well, and if we could move things forward strongly and wisely, it could be, we could create such an attractive and fascinating pattern and set an example for the world people to adapt. So this is, we are standing against such ignorance, and of course this modern ignorance is not the same way in different parts of the world. Well, I believe that crystal and a perfect example of modern ignorance is the United States of America. I mean, all over the world you could see, compared to elsewhere in the world, you could see this ignorance standing out in the United States, you know, in every sense of the word. I mean, you can say that America is a regime where you see immoral issues, and the decadence is spread out and promoted, and you see national wealth moving toward the wealthy and the rich. It's absorbed by the wealthy. I mean, the country as rich as the United States, you can see the situation there where you see it's a little bit colder than usual. Some people die in the streets. When you see it's getting a little hot, and again, some people die on the streets. And what does that mean? Well, this is the manifestation of modern ignorance. That's a manifestation of tyranny, tension-making, and discrimination. This is the epitome of all this, the United States of America. So the regime in the U.S. is only creating tensions, and it lives and it survives on tension. I mean, they feed on tension. They feed on crises that they create all over the world. That's what they feed on. So this is such a move that exists there. There are some mafia networks that are of power inside the United States. And the crises in the world, they feed on all those crises and they take advantage of them. So basically, the United States is a mafia regime. America is a mafia regime. Political mafia, economic mafia, weapon manufacturing mafia. A whole different kinds of mafia that have the power in that country and lead things, and they have different affairs of the country, and under their thumb they appoint people, they remove people from their posts, they bring presidents to power, these mafioso. And then when you see this mafia-based regime, they require in different parts of the world to face crises. So that's what they do. They create sources of crisis. In West Asia, you see how many crises they've created. Well, they require a creature like Daesh or ISIS. That's their own trained pet. And explicitly and openly, they had videos and they simply beheaded the people on camera or burned them alive or simply drowned them, and then they would just spread out the video to the world. This is what America created. They confessed, they admitted this, that this is their own creation. They are just creating tension. So if they are not able to create tension, then they have the arms manufacturing companies cannot make maximum profit. So they have to create tension and crisis in the world so that the interests of this mafia would be maximized. Well, today, in my opinion, Ukraine is also a victim of the same policy. Now, what's happening in Ukraine these days, they have to do with the very same policies of the United States. The United States pushed Ukraine to this point. It was America that intervened and meddled in the domestic affairs of that country, and they had gatherings and events against the governments, creating this purple revolution, making color coup d'etats, and then the presence of American senators inside different opposition the forums, appointing this government and removing the other government. This is what will end up in the same thing. Of course, we're against destruction and war, no matter where in the world. This is what we have always emphasized. The killing of the people, the destruction of the country's infrastructure. These are what we do not approve of, no matter where they happen in the world. This is what we have always talked about. We are not just like Westerners. When there is a bomb that they drop in Afghanistan and they target a wedding group and they turn the wedding into a mourning, this is what they call fight against terrorism. It's not a crime in their opinion. This is their logic. In the West, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, America, what is it doing in eastern Syria? Why are they plundering Syrian resources, Syrian oil? Why do they steal Afghan money and funds? It's the national wealth of the Afghans that they have confiscated and seized. In West Asia, the crimes that the Zionists are committing every day and night, why do they defend those crimes? These are tension-creating and given rise to crises. And this is what they do, and they're all done in the name of defending human rights and such issues. We unlike them, if we see something happen somewhere that we favor, we would not judge it differently than when it happens elsewhere. For 8 years, the people of Yemen are being bombarded, and the Westerners do not condemn this. They even support that. By words, by media, and also in practice. That's how they are. Of course, in Ukraine, we want the hostilities to stop. We don't want war to go on in Ukraine. We just want it to stop. But the remedy to any crisis is solely possible if you identify the root of the crisis. The root of the crisis in Ukraine is the U.S. policies, is the Westerners' policies. So this is the root of the problem. You need to identify them in the first place, and then accordingly, you can pass judgment, and if you can take action, then you take action accordingly. Okay, we're speaking of Ukraine. There are also some lessons that can be learned. You know, you see some speakers and writers mention some of these points. I want to mention a couple of them for you. One being that the support lent by Western powers for the people, for their stooges and their puppet regimes. This is only a mirage. It's not reality. All governments and states should realize this. Those states that feel they have the backing of the U.S. and Europeans. See what happened in Ukraine, and yesterday what happened in Afghanistan. The president of Ukraine, a few days ago, he said the same thing, and also the Afghan former president also said the same thing, that we put our trust in America. We had our trust in Western governments, and they just left us alone. They left us high and dry. You cannot trust these people. This is the first lesson to learn. Now, the Islamic Republic, everybody has heard about Iran's independence and freedom, but those who are depending on America, they need to draw this lesson from these developments, and they should realize and come to terms with realities. Now, the second lesson to be drawn is that the people are the biggest supporters of governments. If people had entered this stage in Ukraine, the situation of the Ukrainian government wouldn't be so easy, because people were not there. People were not on the stage because they didn't recognize the government. Just like the time when America attacked the Saddam era, Iraq, people did not defend their country. People were standing idle by, and then America got dominant. But in the very same country, in Iraq, when Daesh attacked, the people went on the stage, and Daesh, that was a very big menace. The Iraqi people were able to push them back because they were there on the battlefront. It's the people. People are the main factor for independence of countries. So we have experienced this ourselves in the Iraq-imposed war, the whole defense era. The people were there on the stage. People pitched in. And then, despite the fact that big powers and superpowers backed Saddam Hussein and helped him in different ways, the Islamic Republic of Iran, with the help of its people, managed to leave the enemy in failure. This is another lesson that we need to learn. Hopefully we could open our eyes, we could open up our ears, and think properly, see properly, and take action properly, so we'll be able to also benefit from these points and lessons. May Almighty God elevate the status of the late Imam Khomeini. These are the lessons that he taught us. He was the one who made us move in this direction. Hopefully the pure souls of our martyrs would get united with the soul of the Prophet Muhammad. They brought us pride in this world. Once again, I would like to offer felicitations and blessings be upon Imam Mahdi, peace be upon him. And that's the end of the speech.